I'm over 23,000 pounds right now on this 14-foot trailer. Okay, 14,360 empty. Calculate how many tons of manure I've been hauling. These fields, so your alfalfa fields got to get a lot of manure on them. Your grass fields kind of limit out. You really only need probably about a ton per acre of manure or compost on a grass hay field. Me and some of my other buddies that do, manage hay in a manure only type production system, we don't see a lot of difference between areas where we apply it really heavy and areas you don't. On a grass field, I see it on alfalfa, a big difference. You definitely see a hit. But I think grass only hay, manure only production is not a real good viable option, because if you don't have a lot of water, it doesn't matter what you do, you just don't get any growth for second cut. You get a good, otherwise you're a 1 year, this is a Suit XA, about 14-month-old animals, 12 to 14 months, and growth rates are real good on the. I don't know what my weight gain is, but I'm thinking I'm up to 2 pounds a day probably. But anyways, really the way we get our nitrogen in the manure only system is we got to have these old fields, just got to plow them up and get some legumes in them. Depending on the year, if you don't get a lot of rain, you just don't get production. I'm going to go about a ton per acre. So, yeah, basically I think you get a ton and a half on these grass fields. I think that's adequate. If you're going to go with a manure compost only production system, like what I'm doing, and alfalfa has to get a lot there's no good information on if you want to just use basic inputs that you produced on your own farm, i.e. organics. You know, everything is kind of NPK related, and I just think that most of soil science research has just been dumbed down to focus on these big macro nutrients. But the bottom line for me is I can't afford to buy off-farm inputs. Fertilizer. I don't know how you can make it pay. I've been doing this 30 years, and this is yeah, it's not a low input because of the amount of work you got to do this. As I was saying, this is not necessarily low input, but it's a sustainable system. I mean, what am I going to do? It's foolish not to try to use these nutrients that I'm producing and then try to scale, you know, my economics here of this system based on what I can produce fertility-wise on my own farm, instead of having to continuously buy, you know, pay somebody else for my nutrients for my farm. So that's how I've been doing my hay production. It's working pretty good. And you know, as a disclaimer about this year's yields, everybody else's second cutting on the grass has just been nothing. I mean, a lot of people didn't do any, you know, and that includes people that are fertilizing. They just didn't get, there just isn't much yield. But a lot of people obviously didn't fertilize this year because they couldn't afford it. So, but you know, as far as really recycling, you know, doing your carbon and nitrogen cycle here on your own farm, I would like to see more discussion and information on this topic. You know, like what's really going on here? What kind of yields are people getting? How much do you really think you need to put on? I mean, you know, what is the optimum amount of manure and compost to put on hay field? And you know, based on, a lot of it's got to be based on economics. I can tell you that. One thing to add too, so this stuff usually runs, this aged manure that's been piled, runs probably about 30% moisture.